Hello and welcome to part 5, Skybox Terrain Hell. In this part I will just create a simple skybox and then apply terrain with simple vertex editing and painting to it. I just opened the Arena's Textures container, and under the Sky Dome subcategory there are some nice skybox textures to use. They're all, or the majority are in 512 by 512 in size. So we just create a simple cube, those dimensions, and subtract it. And for each face we just assign one texture to it, and make sure they probably line up. Yeah, just like that. And yeah, that's it. For the ground level, I just select this, for example, random. The next thing we need is a zone info, a sky zone info to be exact. We just place it in here and change the ambient brightness to 200 or whatever value you want to, depending on the brightness you want. And the next step is creating a giant room to fit our skybox and terrain. In this case I just create 20,000 in each direction and move it out of the terrain the skybox mesh. I also make sure if you're creating a giant room that you move it up, because at a certain Z coordinate the player will die or get killed. That's just how how the level is set up. You can change the value of the property in the level info though. But for now, just make sure it's not that deep, otherwise you would just die when you spawn. So subtract the giant room, and now we just select all the faces of the room to be replaced with the skybox. I do this for every face except the ground level. So we selected all, right-click surface property. We choose fake backdrop, and now the skybox will be projected to the faces. Okay, and finally we place a zone info in here. Pro tip: if you're dealing with large rooms and you want to change the icon size of the actors, you can do that in the display draw scale option or property. That way you can simply change the icon size. Also gonna add ambient brightness in here, 200. The reason I do this is because in the skybox itself, if you don't change the ambient brightness in the skybox, the projected textures on the faces in here will be dark. And at the same time, you have to add a zone info with the brightness in here to illuminate the actual assets or actors inside this BSP. So you have to do this more or less twice. And finally, for the terrain, we have to set in the zone info category the be terrain zone property to true. And then build all, save before proceeding. Okay, so for the terrain, oddly enough, I don't know why, the terrain gets created at the current camera position in regards to the X and Y coordinates, so it's better to be in the center of the room. And now we need a good ground texture. For example, in the unique subcategory, there's this one, I guess. And now next step is terrain. We click on the icon with the two hills, which says terrain editing. Opens up a new window. And here we select the new button, or press a new button, and it will open up the terrain the creation tool. And by default, the X and Y size is 256. This should not exceed the 256, or you should not put in like larger numbers, because the game cannot really handle large terrains, and it will most likely crash during the creation. So you should not exceed this limit. Although there's like a little bit space up. Like I guess you could add additional 64 or 128, but I'm not sure about it. Click OK. Go to the Layers tab. Select the first layer. Click on New. And with the texture we just selected in a texture browser, you hit OK, and the ground, the terrain ground texture, the first layer gets applied with the texture. Save. Okay, so unfortunately it doesn't look that good right now, but we can easily scale the texture by going to the tools tools window and select the text scale, and then holding Control and the left mouse button, and the right mouse button, you can scale those textures around to fit your needs. And it obviously this texture isn't really made for terrain, because you can easily see how it's like repeating itself. But yeah, for demonstration purposes. So we can also pan the texture around if we need to, and we can also rotate the texture around if we need to. So just save before you do anything, or after like 2 or 3 minutes save, because the terrain editing is very fragile in this editor. Basic terrain editing is done with vertex editing. You can specify a inner and outer radius, as you can see in the 3D viewport, which means like if you choose a larger outer radius, you can see the terrain, the vertices of the terrain grid move in conjunction with the inner radius. So like holding Control and then 1 second. Yeah. So left clicking on the terrain grid selects the vertices around you, and holding Control and both mouse keys will either move it up or down. It just lags around a little bit. So yeah, just be careful, because you can easily crash the editor with that. And the vertex selection is kinda, not really responsive. Sometimes it just doesn't select it all. Sometimes it selects it immediately. So yeah, you can just fiddle around with the settings to make the terrain the way you want to. Yeah. There's also painting. Painting is like, as the name implies, you can paint another texture onto the base ground layer. The way you do it is just like you select a new texture you want to paint over. Just choose this one, for example. You select the second layer or a new layer, click on new again, change the names, and with that you can, and the paint tool, you can paint over the ground level by holding Control and then left mouse button. You can paint over, and again, doesn't look good, so we can scale the texture to fit it better. And you can also rotate it and pan it or whatever you want to do. So yeah, that's basic terrain terrain editing you can do. As I said previously, I recommend like saving every few minutes because the editor tends to crash very often when you do terrain editing. Yeah, so we just built all. To close this terrain editing window, you can just click on the camera icon on the top left to go back to the original view. And finally, we just add the player start, move it up. Where is it? To the terrain and build all. Save. And open up the game. As you can see, the Skybox works in the terrain. And here's like the end of the terrain, and down there that's like the end of the big room. But the illusion of the fake backdrop still applies. Okay, so see ya in the next part.